I think you have to find spaces to leave your title at the door. I think you have to be accessible to people. I think I have an aversion to sitting in the front row of things when I could be sitting in the row where the people who are impacted and drive the most change are. And I think you should always be seeking out people who know more than you about whatever challenges exist and whatever opportunities exist.
Welcome to another episode of Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Shop, co-founder of Social Driver. Let's face it, Washington is the center of influence in the US and arguably in the world. Chief Influencer features leaders who have figured out how to break through in today's fragmented and fast-changing environment. Social Driver teamed up with the Communications Board and the George Washington University College of Professional Studies to recognize these incredible leaders as chief influencers and highlight how they inspire and influence others. I am thrilled to welcome today's guest, Tiffany Benjamin, CEO of the Humana Foundation, the philanthropic arm of Humana Inc., an organization with a bold agenda to advance health equity and create more resilient communities nationwide. Now, before we dive in, here are a few things I think you should know about Tiffany. Number one, she is redefining what it means to lead in philanthropy. At the Humana Foundation, she's mobilizing funding, partnerships, and research to tackle the root causes of poor health, from shaping a healthier approach to nutrition, to creating healthier emotional connections as a vital part of holistic care, supporting long-term disaster recovery efforts, and deploying knowledge and resources as a steward of good health. Number two, she brings a rare combination of experience across law, corporate leadership, and public policy. Tiffany previously served as president of the Lilly Foundation and led ESG and social impact strategy at Eli Lilly after earlier roles on Capitol Hill and in corporate litigation. And number three, her leadership is shaping the national conversation on equity and impact. A Harvard Law School graduate, Tiffany's a frequent voice on the future of giving and was recently named to the inaugural Time 100 Philanthropy list, recognizing the most influential leaders in global philanthropy. Tiffany, you have been called many things: a health equity strategist, corporate changemaker, Time 100 honoree, and of course, chief executive. Today, we're thrilled to call you a chief influencer. Welcome.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm thrilled to be considered a chief influencer.
Well, I think it is unquestionable that you are a chief influencer, and we will hear today all of the reasons why. But I thought we'd start where you and I first connected, which is through the Face the Fight campaign. Humana Foundation was a founding partner. And I wonder if you could talk about what made that initiative stand out to you, and why did you say yes so early?
Yeah, thank you for asking, especially because I love the Face the Fight initiative. It is a veteran suicide prevention initiative. We're really focused on what we can do both on a clinical side, but holistically to reduce stigma, to help veterans and their families feel supported, and basically to say that our service members deserve to be valued and cared for in every way.
Yeah.
I love it because when we think about health, oftentimes we don't talk about mental health. We treat it differently. And this is an initiative where we say your mental health is just as important as your physical health. One of the reasons we signed up early is we are a corporate philanthropy organization, which means that we like to think like a corporation. Corporations think in terms of metrics and growth, and we move fast and we take risks, but we drive for change. And what we love about Face the Fight is it's based on a metric: lives saved. You can't get any clearer than measuring your impact by the number of people who are impacted by the work on a measure of lives saved. Another thing, which probably makes sense for why I'm talking to you today, is what we loved about it is the reality is foundations aren't always really that great at partnering with each other. But if we're going to drive for change, coalitions are the way to do it.
Yeah.
You individually can't address mental health challenges. I individually can't address this. We're stronger together, and we all have different bases of people we interact with. And so we can really elevate the message if we're willing to say, I want to partner with USAA, I want to partner with the Reach Resilience Foundation, and we all want to make this difference together.
That's one of the things that really struck me, Tiffany, about Face the Fight is the vast number of partners of that coalition. I think it's over 250 at this point, corporations, nonprofits, universities that all are focused on this challenge around veteran suicide. And I wonder if you could just share a little bit more about, being part of a coalition like that and sort of what you were saying, the need for groups to come together, because these huge challenges that we all read about every day, that we all experience in our lives. I mean, none of us is not touched by issues of mental health or of suicide in our networks, friends, family. I mean, it's just something that we're all familiar with, unfortunately. And I want to hear a little bit more about how organizations that may be focused on different things in their business side are coming together to tackle these challenges.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And in particular, I think we all see these things show up, whether it's in our workforce, whether it's in our families, whether it's the people we interact with. And challenges around mental health have always existed. But frankly, the time of COVID really laid bare all of these challenges that all of us were struggling with in terms of our mental health and our understanding that different people might need different needs to address
Mhm.
whatever challenges they're struggling with. And so, what I've really loved about this coalition is the ability of these organizations that are thinking about different things. I primarily focus on health equity, and we're thinking about how do we meet veterans where they're at, whether they're in a rural area or an urban area, whether their gender, sexual orientation, race, all of those things. We're trying to think what is the strongest connection we can have to folks, no matter who they are, to tell them that they're loved and supported. And what I like about this initiative is there's space for people who are thinking about veterans, there's space for people who are thinking about mental health, there's space for people who are thinking about really just supporting those who have taken care of us. And so I love the concept that we can all find some unifying force and say, there's nothing to be ashamed of if you're struggling. You have had some challenges like everybody else, and you deserve care and love and respect, and we value you. And you can find a group of people who can just see the humanity in each other. And that's what makes this a coalition is it's a group of people who really believe we can help each other and do good if we just take the time to listen and connect with each other.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. I want to ask you to think back on your career path a little bit. When we think of influence, obviously job title is one component of influence, what people see you as what your role is. And you've gone from Capitol Hill to corporate law to philanthropy. What stands out to you as an inflection point in that journey? And was there a moment you realized your path was shifting in a new direction?
Yeah, every day, Anthony. Um, I will tell you, everything I do now, I think really is about living the vision and sort of the mission of what my mom has shaped me to be.
Mm.
My mom was a social worker. She was actually a telephone operator when that was a thing. I'm sure plenty of people don't remember that anymore. And she went back to school to be a social worker. And she was a single mom. So she took me with her on her internships when she was working. These are pre-HIPAA times. And she worked with older adults and seniors in nursing homes and hospitals. And she actually worked with HIV/AIDS patients in the 80s when it was a time in which people were really scared to even say HIV/AIDS out loud. And she taught me empathy and compassion and that listening to people telling their stories for them when they can't and seeing the good in everyone is really the best way that you can serve yourself and other people. And so everything I've done in my career has really been in service of other people, I think. I went to law school because I wanted to help people, and I viewed the law as a way to make sure systems were good and were being upheld. And I entered philanthropy for the same reason. I saw it as my ability to make an impact. And sometimes people will ask me, like, how do you reconcile these like you did and fix all of those things and connect it all together? And what I would say is as long as you're doing something where you feel like you are making people around you better, you're doing something of impact. And I've always sought out places where I can feel like I'm making things better for the people around me.
I want to ask you about a specific career moment. If I understand it right, you kind of had a side job inside.
Yeah.
It turned into a new career path. I wonder if you could expound on that and tell us that story.
Yeah. So, um, people sometimes will ask me, did I always know that I wanted to run a foundation when I was a kid? And I said, no, I didn't even know that was a job until a
Right.
decade ago. But if I had, yes, I absolutely would want it to have that as a career. So I was a lawyer, an in-house lawyer at a company, Eli Lilly and Company. And you know how when you get a new job, they're like, here's your new job. By the way, you have these 35 other things you do that are just things. And one of them was to be the corporate secretary for various legal entities, including their corporate foundation. And most of the time, people just sort of do that as a side ancillary job and they don't think about it. But I got really interested in it. I started asking questions. I started spending time with the president of the foundation, really caring about the work they were doing. And they were doing some work out in community. And I showed up and was like, what can I do as a private citizen to help too? And so I was just doing that because I cared and because I thought it was the right thing to do. And I had started doing volunteer work with the lawyer. So I ran our pro bono committee. And one day, the head of the foundation called and said, Tiffany, I'm calling to let you know that I'm leaving and you're my corporate secretary. And I just want to let you know. And I said, that's really sad, Rob. I want your job. I don't even know where it came from. It just like flowed out of my mouth. And that is how I began the next journey in my career here to be in philanthropy. It was really about being curious. And it was really about leaning into opportunities that seem exciting.
I love that. I think it just shows that importance of, you trusted your gut a little bit on that one and your instinct and how paths are not always so clearly laid out. Like you said, you didn't know that job existed. And then when you found yourself close to it, you realized that was what you wanted to do.
Exactly. It drives me crazy. Sometimes you'll have people and they'll tell these stories of their career where they'll be like, I did this and this and this, and that's how I got here. And
Yeah.
I like to tell people it's never a linear path. The reality is you look at where you're at now and then you sort of tie those things together backwards because you
Yeah.
weren't always making those decisions with that pathway.
Yeah.
And to me, I think if I feel like I'm driving for change, that's the place I wanna be, and
Right.
philanthropy is a place where I feel like I can be impactful and drive
Yeah.
really positive change.
Absolutely. So titles, especially big titles like, CEO of a foundation, titles can open doors, but they can also create distance. And I want to ask, how do you stay grounded and connected to the people you're serving through listening or connection? Whether you're with another CEO or a community leader, a teenager, a teammate, how do you make sure that your title doesn't create that barrier that sometimes titles can?
Yeah. So, the first thing is I actually just really like humans. I think they're really, really interesting, and so I think you can learn something from every single person you meet. And so I've never gone into a space where I haven't felt like, "Ooh, I can learn from anybody who's had an experience that's different than my own." And I think one of the ways I do that, just sort of practically, is oftentimes I'll get invited to something. And for example, I was invited to an event, and I went, and they were like, "Here's your reserved seat in the front row," and I was like, "No, no, I'm good. I'm going to go sit in the back." I snuck in the back. I sat in the back, and I talked to this gentleman for 20, 30 minutes, just about what he did. He was in violence prevention work, and I just asked him questions. I just said, "I'm Tiffany and I'm interested." And we spent time together talking about the work that he did. And then at the end, I was like, "I would love to come out and see your work." And he said, "Great." And that's when I gave him my card and it got a little weird, but I went out and connected and sat in community. I think I think you have to find spaces to leave your title at the door. I think you have to be accessible to people. I think I have an aversion to sitting in the front row of things when I could be sitting in the row where the people who are impacted and drive the most change are. And I think you should always be seeking out people who know more than you about whatever challenges exist and whatever opportunities exist.
Yeah. Leave your title at the door. Sometimes I love that. That's such a great takeaway to remember. Speaking of sort of being with the people that, are impacted, you spoke earlier about how your mom brought you along to work and the inspiration that you got from her to help people. I wonder if you could also talk about maybe lessons that you learned from watching her as a social worker, serving folks in the community, and how those lessons have maybe stayed with you now that you are in, a role with a different title.
Yeah, I think it's I'm also very clear that my mom is just like a substantially better person than me. I think the thing I learned most from her is that sitting with people and just listening is the most impactful way to help. I we were talking about face the fight a little bit earlier, and what we know about suicide prevention is that oftentimes the people closest to you just asking, "Are you okay?" can help in a moment of crisis. And then really meaning, "Are you okay?" Like, really
Mhm.
meaning it and really sitting with people and really listening to what's happening. Asking, "How are you?" and really meaning it is different than just asking, "Hey, how you doing?" And I learned that from my mom, and I've carried it through this real view that listening to people about whatever challenges they are in is really the important way to drive for change. So at the Humana Foundation, we're really, really thoughtful about making sure that what we're doing is community centered and that we do a lot of community listening. We have what we call the Senior Council, and it is a group of high school seniors and older adults who advise us on our work, tell us what's happening in community, tell us you should be thinking about this or you should not be thinking about this. We love the intergenerational element of that, but I think the other thing we love about it is they will point out things there is no way we could possibly have thought of.
Mm.
And all we have to do is sit and listen. And we come out with better outcomes and solutions when we sit and listen to people. And so I hope that when I think about legacy, because I'm getting older these days, I hope that part of my legacy will be that people around me felt like they were seen and advocated for no matter who they are, no matter where they come from, no matter what their life has been.
When you talk about bringing seniors in high school youth together with senior citizens, you kind of had an experience when you were younger working with seniors in the senior living center that your mom worked at, didn't you? Where there was kind of a
Yeah.
partial memento, if I remember correctly.
Oh, yeah. So, my mom was a social worker in a nursing home for quite a while. And I went to visit very regularly because my mom worked there. And they had a little workshop where everybody would work on all kinds of things, bookcases, whatever it was. And one day I peeked through the little window and there was a dollhouse in there. And I was like, so cute. That's the coolest thing I've ever seen. Um, and then it turned out that the residents of the nursing home had made it for me as a Christmas present
Oh.
because I was there a lot and because I loved it. I had it for a really long time. I still wish I had it. It was so special to me, how much these people I'm not related to loved and cared for me, in ways that were, for a kid beyond my imagination. Getting my own, handmade dollhouse is really beautiful. And for me in particular, I spent my summers with my great grandma. I spent a lot of time in the nursing home with my mom, um, understanding the wisdom and love and care that seniors can bring to people has been my lived experience. And so I feel really special that the work that we do also gets to focus on older adults and what they bring and how much value and wisdom and frankly just love there is in the world.
It strikes me that if folks hear about your senior council that you have of seniors in high school and senior citizens at Humana Foundation, they wouldn't necessarily know about that experience from you as a young person being in the nursing home and getting that gift from the seniors, and it's kind of a symbol of your relationship. And then it really, the dots connect, at least for me, that makes sense of how you've seen the value of those intergenerational relationships personally, and why you've championed that senior council at the Humana Foundation. And, it sounds like an amazing idea. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about how it came to be, how you get the right people on it, and how you facilitate those conversations to take out the lessons and use them to inform your work, because that could be a valuable thing for folks to hear. Maybe someone who runs a trade association and is trying to bridge the gap between young people who are potential members, coming into the workforce, and those who are leaving the workforce but have a lot of wisdom. I think what you've done, there's many of us could take away lessons from it.
Yeah, thank you for that. We work at it pretty seriously. So, overall, we have three focus populations, which are kids, school age kids, veterans, and seniors, older adults. And we were building out our work and we were working with nonprofits, and we realized, hey, we don't have the voice of community. When someone is pitching an idea to us, do we know that this is an idea that will actually make sense in community? And we appreciated that every place we do work is unique and different. And we do work in Florida, Texas, Louisiana, and Kentucky. And we know each of those places has its own personality, its own culture, its own way of living. And we realize what we really need is people on the ground who aren't beholden to us, but are only beholden to themselves and their communities to push us, right? Like that's what it was about, is helping us think about issues in the right way. So we of course posted on our website, but we recruited. So we called our nonprofit partners, we called our corporate partners. We said, "Hey, do you know anybody who would be interested in this?" We talked to folks at foundations related to school systems because we thought, "Hey, this would be great for high school seniors. They can put it on their resume." And frankly, it gets to build out intergenerational connection. They get to learn about geographies that are not their own. And so we built this group. They rotate every 2 to 3 years. The seniors in high school clearly rotate more often because, they're seniors for a year. And they come together once a quarter. We talk about our grant making. They hear from some of our grantee partners. They tell us what's on the ground. Sometimes we'll ask them, hey, we want to focus on social isolation. Like, can you work together in groups to tell us what we should be thinking about here? What are the most important issues? And so we meet with them really regularly, and we try to provide them with updates on our work so that they can help us understand, are we picking the right things? Are these the right things for your community? And they give us substantially more than we give them. We're so grateful to them for the ways that they teach us about how people actually live and breathe the work we do.
This episode is brought to you by the George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. With in-person and online programs ranging from master's degrees in public relations strategy to certificate programs in digital communications, GW offers more than just the credentials to help working professionals get ahead. It prepares them to be leaders in their field. Check out cps.gwu.edu for more information. If somebody was thinking about creating some sort of advisory group of some kind, like what you've done, what advice would you have for them as they get started doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. The first thing is we had really transparent guidelines. So we were like, you need to be this age, you need to live in this place. And then and we were really clear and kept it simple, right? And so we didn't provide a lot of detail in the application. We leaned really heavily on interviews.
Sure.
And then we also equipped them with the ability to share information about the work we do, right? Like, so we wanted them to feel like advocates for our work too. So we had a really brief application and then use your network, right?
Sure.
We really, really reached out to all of our community partners to say, we think this is a great opportunity. Please use your network to find people you think. And then we were good about telling people we will use your work. I think one of the challenges is oftentimes people will create these advisory committees and they won't always listen to them or they
Sure.
won't always do the work. Um, and it doesn't mean we do everything our advisory committee tells us to do, but we are clear with them that if you invest this time, it will shape what we do and how we do it.
Yeah.
That is really, really important is to tell people this is the impact of the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we miss that in saying like, just come along on my thing.
Yeah.
You have to assure people that it's worth their time.
It ties into something. I think I remember you telling me that you saw, when I always ask, what's your sort of superpower when it comes to influence? I think we talked about curiosity and how curiosity is just such a really powerful. And when I hear your description of this group, right, it really showcases that value of curiosity and using that to learn from this group. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that superpower of yours and maybe even any examples of where that's helped you get better solutions across your career, showing up with that sense of curiosity.
Yeah. So I will give you very practical examples of how we use it in our work day to day here at the foundation, and also just sort of how I use it conceptually as a person. Here is an example of how curiosity operates for us as a foundation. So we have a board, and 4 times a year we go and we present to that board with our recommendations, our thoughts, things we're interested in. And in advance of that, we have the entire staff come together and really review the slides and discuss everything that's happening um, up to the presentation because I actually view feedback as a gift. And I actually think it's a great way to get everybody on the team understanding where we're going, what the
Mhm.
strategy is at. And I tell everybody, you are making people better by asking questions, by being curious, by pushing them. And if you have that question, our board's going to have that question. And what it's done is it's built a staff who are inherently curious, um, unwilling to just stay quiet, which I love about us. Ask questions, think about how everything fits into the strategy. We also spend a lot of time learning. We met at a coalition meeting for Face the Fight, and I
Mhm.
was the only one there for my team. I just got back from the Council on Foundations event. We are out and about, always learning from other people because there is not one way to do this work, and there's no right
Yeah.
way to drive change. So you have to constantly learn from others about what worked and didn't work, so you can refine and get better.
Yeah.
For me, I think I've always been a deeply curious person, and I really, really like learning. Um, but I wouldn't even be in this role if I wasn't a deeply curious person. I told you the story about I was plodding along as a lawyer. I was perfectly happy. And if I hadn't said, "Hey, what does this foundation thing do?" And been curious about what it can build and grow, there is no way I would be in philanthropy. And it was really just being curious, not intentioned around finding a specific job, but led me to a career path that I view as my calling.
So philanthropy is your calling. And I think others agree because you were just named to the Time 100 philanthropy list.
Hey,
Congratulations. I feel
I'm
like that is
thank and Lin-Manuel Miranda and Steph Curry and Aisha Curry.
it,
Crazy school weeks.
it's so cool. I was so excited to see that. We'd already booked this interview and then that happened. And I was like, oh my gosh, we got to fit that into the questions. What a cool thing. So yeah, what did that mean to you personally? And what do you think it reflects about the future of giving?
It was deeply special. I have never done this work for credit. I really genuinely believe in our ability as humans to drive for change by just investing in others. Like, I really, really believe in that. I really think that there are a lot of brilliant ideas and people trying to make their communities better. And if we just support them and uplift them, they can do amazing things. Like, that's just what I believe. And so I wasn't gunning for an award, and I certainly wasn't expecting it. And frankly, to receive it for just getting up and doing what I think is right was powerfully impactful. I still get a little weepy if I'm being honest
Yeah.
about it. And although my children keep me humble because I asked my son, I was like, "What does this mean?" He's 9. And he was like, "It means you're good at philanthropy." And I was like, "What's philanthropy?" And he said, "I don't know. It's like therapy." And I was like, "Sure." Um, I am really honored. And what I really like about this award, I was named in the Trailblazers category. They had different categories, is that what it says is there are a million different ways to do this work. There were people like me in corporate foundations. There are private individuals who are giving to specific causes. There are private foundations who are doing really intentional work in their places. There were international NGOs that were thinking about things around the rainforest or around human rights. And I think what it says about the sector is that it's growing and diversifying, but also having an award that acknowledges the force for good that people can be, I think is so deeply needed. Like, we
Yeah.
need to reward people and acknowledge people when they help others. And I think time saying people who help others are important is a good sign. Like, it's a good sign for where we can get to and what we should value about people.
Yeah. And I love how it featured so many different aspects of philanthropy
100%.
categories and the different, because people show up in different ways.
100%. And the real through thread was people who really cared about making a difference. Like, it was simple.
Yeah.
Like, everybody believed in their mission. Everybody understood that different people might have different missions, but that everybody was there for good. And so for me, sometimes in this world, we find fault in other people or we decide something's good or bad for one certain thing. But I think most people are inherently good and want to help their neighbors and
Mm.
want to help their community and do the right thing. We just don't spend enough time talking about it. Right.
Yeah. I'm a big believer that faces are the new logos. And so when you see an award like this around people, it tells a different facet of the story than
Yeah.
from just the company, because it brings in your personal narrative and your personal why. And I think when it comes to our digital presence, we always have to remember if faces are indeed the new logos, we have to elevate people and we have to communicate through people. So some leaders, they completely delegate their digital presence, but I know you are very hands-on with LinkedIn in particular. And I wonder if you could talk about why that platform is meaningful to you. And, how do you balance authenticity with strategy, especially as, technology evolves and now we have AI, et cetera. Can you share a little bit behind the curtain about Tiffany and LinkedIn?
Yeah, I love LinkedIn. I'm really into it. I'm very honest about it. And I do think sometimes people get intimidated by it. And I don't think you should be. It's got a lot of helpful tools. But what you said is really true is if you want people to understand your story and your mission, you have to show it to them. And what we know is, frankly, the human attention span is getting shorter. Don't worry, I'm not going to get a TikTok. No one wants to see that. But you have to continuously show people the ways in which you are investing. And so for me, that means most weeks I'm on LinkedIn and I do run my own LinkedIn 2 to 3 times a week. I'm sharing what I'm doing, what I'm learning, who I'm learning from. Yesterday, I was at the Council on Foundations meeting, as I noted, and I posted a quote from one of the keynote speakers because I thought it was from Darren Walker, the Ford Foundation, and he said, "We are in the business of hope." And I thought, at a moment in time where there's so much change in the outside world, people in philanthropy need to be reminded that we are in the business of hope. It was powerful. And then it was important to note these intersections I have with the things I learned there. And so I think LinkedIn can be a tool for sharing what you know, but you also have to understand that there are a bunch of people using LinkedIn to share what they know. And so if you don't have a hook, you don't have something that connects it to something greater, people are going to keep moving. So you have to share part of yourself. I'm intentional in sharing that I love the Kentucky Derby because I live in Louisville, Kentucky. But I'm also intentional in sharing my really cool hats. And I'm intentional in talking about how the Derby is an economic development engine for the city. You can do all of the above. My hats are my personality, and my hats are my authenticity. My role is to think about how to uplift the many communities we serve, and I can tie those two things together as long as I'm thoughtful about it.
Yeah, I love that. Um, I want to talk maybe about Humana Foundation a little bit more, and you kind of keying off of what you just said. But I know you've introduced new levels of transparency and access in the work that you do. And I wonder if you just talk about some of those changes that you've made to the grant making process and the feedback you've gotten, because I think that is really an example of how we can change systems to support how we influence others and how they influence us.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, I talk a lot about curiosity and listening, but it doesn't work unless there's accountability. And so I actually think philanthropy should work harder to drive accountability within itself around its processes. That's just sort of my take. For us, in general, our focus is health equity, which means we focus on subpopulations, right? Like we look for places or people where there might be specific challenges in lots of different ways. And we say, can we address your challenge? Um, we felt like if you were going to have a focus like that, you can't then just go and sort of do all your decision making in secret and handpick people. So we actually have an open application on our website. It's not open right now, but it'll open again in 2026. And you go fill out a short form application because we also are respectful of the fact that it can take a lot of time for nonprofits to fill out these applications. And they might have to fill out 20 to get the funding they need. And so we try to create a short form application. Then if it turns out that the short form makes sense, then you can move to our second round, which is a little bit more interactive. But also, if it doesn't, we tell you it didn't. So you're not working really hard on something that wasn't going to make it. I just think that's respect for humans. Sometimes telling people no is the most respectful thing you could do. It's a heck of a lot better than leaving people in that weird gray space where they can't figure it out. And so when someone does not make it, we actually send everybody who applies a note telling them they didn't get it and why. And we think it's not always detailed. It's usually pretty simple, but we think that we owe it to people to tell them this didn't work for us. And I don't think it's because it was a bad project. I say no to a lot of really great projects. It's mostly it doesn't fit our strategy or this moment in time, or it doesn't have the metrics that we use for our work. But I really believe you have to be honest and transparent with the people you are trying to serve. And so our open application process is really just us reinforcing our vision around making sure we're focused on the communities we're trying to serve. That also means respecting them enough to say yes and no.
Yeah. I think that is, there's a lot you can do on the inside that can really impact how you influence on the outside. And I think
Exactly.
there's internal kind of governance changes that you've made really say a lot about your approach to leading the foundation. You've also told me a little bit about your thoughts on empathy as a form of influence. And I wonder if you could share a little bit about that, especially how do you hold on to that mindset while leading at scale?
Yeah.
Because empathy is something we often think of, with individual connections, right? It's easy to be empathetic when you're across the table from one person, but then you're thinking about disasters and complex initiatives and things that affect a much larger group of people. And so, what does empathy look like from a foundation standpoint when you're working with much larger, complex issues than just one person?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think one of the things that any leader should be thinking about is you should never just be at your desk. I'm at my desk today,
Mm.
but I'll be out in community later today. The way that you maintain empathy is by connecting to humans, sitting with people and listening to them and meeting them where they're at. And so I think it's really important for any leader, anybody who wants to influence, to actually go interact with other humans and really, really listen. And if you do, you can find connection with anybody, no matter who they are or where they are. I last year I did a program called Leadership Kentucky, which is where we traveled all across the state to learn about different components of that one state, which is one of our geographies. Um, and what I loved about it is there are people who had totally different lived experiences from me, but we could tell a great story about like how our parents treated us in the summers when we were kids, and we would connect and bond. And what it meant is, I we had several natural disasters that have happened in Kentucky over the last couple of years. I've always had somebody to call or talk to who has that lived experience, who can tell me what's happening so I can respond in the right way. But also so I can remind myself what's most important, which is in the end, it's the people.
Yeah. As we close out, I want to ask your thoughts on just influence in general. If we put the word influence at the center, what does it mean to you now as you've learned so much across your career and worn so many different hats? Maybe that's even literal with your
Literal
Kentucky
hat.
Derby thing. Yeah,
I
you have
do love a
lots of
hat. I do love a hat.
fabulous hats. How's the definition of influence changed as your platform and your responsibilities have grown? And, what do you think other leaders should know when it comes to their own influence?
I think there was a time in my life where I thought influence was really being the loudest person in the room. It doesn't mean I was the loudest, but I thought the person with influence must be the loudest one. But what I learned over time is oftentimes the person with the most influence is the quietest person in the room. They're the one who's listening and figuring it out and taking in all the data points and then making a call after that. And so I genuinely think if you want to influence, you have to understand where everybody around you is coming from. And that is the only way your influence sticks. You might get influence for a minute from being the loud voice in the room who's demanding a thing, but your influence sticks because you listened and you heard and you understood what was really going on in any space. And then you were able to develop whatever solution, response, opportunity based on all of the information around you. So I think over time, what I've found out is influence is really about how you uplift others, and influence is really about how you care for others.
Uh, Influence is about how you care for others. I love that. And what you just shared there, at the end, I mean, it's a really great encapsulation of so many of the lessons that we've heard from you today, Tiffany, about influence. You've had a fascinating career journey. You lead a foundation. That's not something that was on your radar early in your career when you were at Harvard Law School and thinking about your legal career. But as you moved into that world, thinking about how you can bring that expertise you have, but also your lived experience as a youth engaging with senior citizens in a nursing home, and how that has now manifested in a senior council at the Humana Foundation, where seniors in high school and senior citizens come together so that you can do what? You can listen to them. You can learn from them. You can take that to apply that knowledge to the communities that you serve and that you want to impact. And it really struck me when you said that sometimes we have to leave our title at the door so that we can be an effective influencer. Instead of taking that reserved seat in the front row, what happens when we go sit in the back of the auditorium? And you gave a great example of how that turned into a conversation with somebody unexpected that, has had ripple effects for you. And that, influence is really co-creation with someone. It comes from a place of curiosity. So just so many incredible lessons. I just am so grateful that you took the time to share them with us today. Grateful for your work, of course, with Face the Fight as a founding partner there, and congratulate you for being named to the Time 100 list of philanthropists. And that's just such an incredible honor. So thank you very much for your time today. And we're excited to continue to follow your journey as a leader and a philanthropist, and now a chief influencer.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll have to get my chief influencer t-shirt.
Yes, that's next on the docket. Chief Influencer is a production of Social Driver. We help clients transform complexity into clarity with people-centered strategies. Whether you're looking to elevate the influence of your brand or of your leaders, check out socialdriver.com to learn more. For show notes or to nominate a guest, visit us at chiefinfluencer.org or follow Chief Influencer on LinkedIn.